Prison guards of Reddit, what is the most wholesome thing you have ever seen happen in your prison? I work non-security. One time I had an inmate walk up to me, super sketchy like. He reached in his pants. I mentally prepared myself to see his junk, but instead he pulled out a piece of fruit. He then proceeded to pull out 20 pieces of fruit from his pants, handing one to every inmate in the room. When I went to scold him about taking food out of the dining hall, he said, "What? I brought some for everyone." Working as a jail nurse, I had an inmate that had a family member pass while they were in. He was clearly upset that he was unable to attend the funeral. The other inmates in his pod held a memorial for him to speak and have support. Wow, that's pretty touching. Hearing stuff like this makes me think very differently of prisons and prisoners. Very unexpected. I'm a social worker in a prison in Belgium. We were doing a cooking workshop with some of the inmates. There was one guy in the group that was a bit mentally challenging. We were decorating cupcakes, and he really didn't know what to do, so he just threw some sprinkles on it randomly. The others stopped him, told him to breathe and relax, showed him how to make smiley faces, how to use different colors, all that good crap. They did it all together. Slowed down the pace just for this one guy. Let me tell you, those cupcakes looked amazing and the one guy was so proud. I work in a prison with a lot of mentally unstable guys, and every time there is one participating in a group, all the other guys are just so patient. It's amazing to see. I'm not a prison guard, but I was a prisoner. Out in the yard, a frog found its way into the enclosure from under the door. A group of inmates found it and started pushing other inmates that wanted to step on it. They protected it until it went back under the door. It was sweet seeing these other inmates, who were in jail for violent crimes, ready to throw down to let the frog live. Don't frick with kids, don't frick with animals. My brother is an inmate in a federal prison, and the last time I went to visit him, this really old dude walked by and they gave one another a nod and "What's up?" I asked my brother who this old man was, and he told me, "Yo, he's just a real old guy that doesn't get into trouble or anything." So me and the guys, they're all freaking huge, watch his back for him. After hearing how little trust and stuff there is in prison, it made me really happy knowing that my brother is still the kind of person I know deep down. You love to hear that. Not prison, but locked in patient psych unit. We had a prisoner shipped to us BC. He needed chemo during his lifelong sentence. I was only 21, female at the time, and he was 6'5", in his 40s. I was assigned as his one-sitter and transport companion. I was terrified to be one with him. BC, he was so much bigger than me and had murdered 3 people about 15 years ago. One day, after his chemo session, I was sitting with him and we were both eating a sandwich. He looked over and said, "I really hope I don't scare you. I'm a different person now. Thank you for eating lunch with me." So simple but so pure. Whoa, quite the moment. Not mine, but a situation from my country. Some inmates got forgotten, not looked in the cell at night. What did they do? Made cake and watched TV. Said it was the best night they had. I've had many a prisoner jump in front of me when someone gets too close and aggressive and tell them to back down. We're just doing a job, and shouting at us does nothing. I've seen prisoners assist staff in restraints when they're struggling. One particular prisoner was shouting he had razor blades in his mouth and wouldn't spit them out. Another prisoner overheard this and ran in to grab them out of his mouth before he could bite staff. I've seen prisoners talk people they've never met down from suicide, and I've seen them do their best to make life for people who are unbearable. They make me laugh my ass off most days, and they're honestly one thing that's kept me in the job as long as I've been in it. That's really beautiful. It's nice to know there are people like you taking care of these men. Not a guard, but did some time at a minimum security facility for drug possession. My cellmate was a professional tattoo artist before his sentence. You'd think there would be a lot of requests for ink jobs, but he spent most of his time making drawings for other prisoners. They'd give him things out of commissary in exchange for a picture they could mail to their families. The warden eventually just let him hold art class once a week, even though having to check in out the pencils and pens was a stark reminder that yes, we were in prison. Those classes were a lot of fun and helped pass the time. We talk trash about each other's art. Your drawing is a crime against the arts. We hereby sentence you to 30 days of finger painting for some of the guys in there. This class was the first time they had any real exposure to art instruction. Seeing someone in their late 30s, 40s, 50s get really excited about shading and blending and in general just stoked about what they made was pretty cool. I still have a drawing of myself that my dad sent me when he was in jail that someone drew for him. I'm actually an art teacher now and I still can't believe how accurate and detailed that drawing is. Also, art classes in prisons should be more common. It's such great therapy and is a great mental exercise. Former CO. In the pod adjacent to mine, a nurse was passing meds when an inmate grabbed her and put a pencil to her neck and threatened to stab her. The CO called a code and I took off running the 100 or so yards to respond. By the time I got there, 3 inmates had tackled and subdued the hostage taker. I walked up and we threw cuffs on the guy and escorted him to SEG. The 3 inmates who helped had a little ceremony and received a reduced sentence. You don't mess with women and don't mess with an inmate's medication. I had to get this far before I realized CO is corrections officer in this context, not commanding officer. I saw inmates playing truth or dare, like little kids. I'll take a dare. Okay. Frick Tony. Damn it, not again. While working the floor one night, one of our officers had a heart attack and collapsed. An inmate rushed over, began CPR, got another inmate to run to the control booth and get help on the way, and saved his life. The inmates cheered and applauded when the officer revived. Not one inmate in that pod tried to take advantage of the situation. There was also an incident with the state facility, where a prison bus was hit and rolled. The inmates did not flee, helped the injured, including the guards, and even directed traffic at the scene until police could take over. In both cases, the inmates involved received reduced sentences. Glad to know they got rewarded for that good behavior with the reduced sentences. A friend of mine's aunt used to be a warden of a prison in MD. She had a cookbook at her house solely made up of recipes from the inmates, one of which was a tamale pie that was to die for. This sounds like it could be an amazing cookbook project that could benefit inmates. Start printing collections and the proceeds go to the inmates' commissaries so they can buy things they need in prison. My sister was a prison guard and was killed in a car accident on her way home from work. We were told by her co-workers that the prisoners held a rosary prayer for her. I always thought that was super nice of them and wish I could have told them thank you. I'm so sorry for your loss. Probably my first 3 months on the job, I was doing a round on a housing unit. My partner radios me because I was in an inmate cell telling me to step out quickly. When I do, I realize he's not looking at me but a floor above and across the unit. There was an inmate who was scaling the bars on the 3rd floor trying to get out over open air, attempting to jump off. I made a dead sprint to him and as I reach him I jump and grab his coveralls legs but was losing grip. Suddenly a taller inmate is next to me and he is able to get hold of a foot and higher up on his coveralls. Together we were able to pull the inmate off the railing and down to solid ground. I was able to secure the inmate and the other one quickly walked to his cell and locked up due to the code being called. Needless to say, the guy that helped me was given a bag lunch as a thank you and he was humble about it. Said it didn't feel right to just let the guy do his thing without trying to help. I love the mental image of all these inmates stepping out to do the right thing, then going back into character like a bunch of computer game NPCs whose interaction trigger has ended. XD. I know they've got to lock themselves up to show they're compliant and not interfering or anything. At the jail I work out we have a frequent flyer who's always in for drugs and DV mostly. He's not all there in the head either. One of our COs were putting said inmate into a holding cell and the CO collapsed to the floor with a seizure. The inmate grabbed him midair, put him on the ground while screaming man down and quickly went into his cell and locked himself in there because of the backup call. Inmate probably saved the CO from getting some injuries. When I had to do community service in my small county, a female, had to go out with the work gang from the men's jail. There weren't any other options for me, so it was a young 20s me with a bunch of hard-bitten frequent flyers more than twice my age. One of the days we broke for lunch at this little out-of-the-way park. It's one of those first really nice days of spring and it's all breezy and pretty out. I finish my lunch and decide to go swing on the swings. At first the men poked a little good-natured fun at me, then one of them came over to join me, then another. Next thing you know there's a bunch of convicts and one deputy playing on the playground equipment and we're all having a grand time. We spun each other on the carousel. We went down the slide. We attempted to seesaw. It was such an odd moment of fun. People tend to forget that the stuff they had fun doing as a kid can still be fun, because they get so hung up on your "I'm not a kid anymore." This is why I love being a kid at heart. I'll still play with kids' toys. I'm not ashamed of it. Nobody should be. I was pregnant and remained full duty with both of my kids. My first pregnancy, I had a block bid. All 69 of those inmates turned into well-meaning grandmas while I was on duty. I'd get up and do a round, and I'd have guys running for the stairs to make sure they were clear and dry. I'd come back to my desk to find snacks and drinks, which I'd give back to them. I did doubles with the package room CO, so I knew where the stuff was from and that it might have cost that visitor a pretty penny to get that stuff for their person, but thought that counts. I was due not too long after Easter, and I was the subject of their main prayer, novena, that year. Also, a lot of old wives' tale crap got spouted my way, but again, it was the thought that counted. These guys were also genuinely concerned I would go into labor on the block, and there was some sort of emergency plan the heavy hitters had, should that have happened, involving what each would do, how to get help to the block the fastest, etc. I didn't find that out until about a year ago. My second pregnancy, I changed bids and was now the yard officer, still am. My old block guys, they'd step to anyone from another block who they thought was giving me attitude, being rude, or just generally inconveniencing me in a mild fashion. They also stepped to new guys in their block and told them what for. I didn't really know this was happening until much later in my pregnancy, and had to tell them to chill out, as I didn't want them to get in trouble if someone took it out of hand. They also prayed for me again that Easter, but I was asked by the priest that time if I was comfortable with it, which I was. My best friend at work recently had her baby, and her regular inmates fell all over themselves as well. TL. DR. Hardened max security inmates turn into caring and concerned grandmas when their regular officer gets in the family way. Former CO. While I was walking the housing unit hallway doing head count, there was this inmate that was laying on his bunk with his back turned to the door, and when I banged on the door with my mag light, he wouldn't move or raise his hand. I banged, nothing. I couldn't stop my count, so I continued. After I radioed the sergeant and told him to make contact in the housing unit I was in, the inmates on both sides of the cell of the man that wouldn't turn over began to bang and make a lot of noise to attempt to get him up. You could tell by their expressions that they were worried. I ordered them back to their cells, since it was I doing an active count and they weren't supposed to move from their doorway. Eventually the sergeant came in and shook the inmate awake. Turns out, there was a change in his medicine, and it made him sleep heavy. When he stood up, his neighbors cheered and were visibly shaken. Though those men came from different backgrounds and all have a different story, some form strong bonds with each other. I used to like seeing them interact with each other during the holidays, too. They are aware of their surroundings, but they made the most of it. Human beings are human beings, even prisoners, capable of evil, but also capable of love and kindness. In college, I worked as a student worker at a state prison. When I was told what had happened one morning when a crew of inmates was outside the prison grounds doing cleanup roadwork, a CO and an inmate were separated from the rest of the crew when the CO, working the chainsaw, somehow wound up on the ground with facial injuries. The inmate with him immediately got on the CO's radio to call for help. While he helped the stunned company, he was later thanked, giving a certificate for his heroism, and a note was made to his file by the warden documenting the incident. It did not get him a cut in time to serve, but it was a plus for when he went up before the parole board. Saw the CO some weeks later and he had the red raised scar marks showing he was healing but no severe damage preventing him from returning to work. I'd be pretty mad if chainsaw to face was not a serious enough injury, occurring on the job no less, to get me out of work for at least like a day or two. I walked up on a group of 4 inmates playing Dungeons and Dragons. When I asked how they played without dice, I think they said that they played rock paper scissors. They had an ongoing game for like 3 years. If you ever get the chance to speak to them again, there is a method where one person, usually the DM, picks a random number between 1 and 20, and the person rolling picks another random number and counts up, looping back to 1 after 20, and the difference is the roll, 20 if you guess the same number. Nurse not custody. In the prison I work at, the inmates write their medical requests on a designated form and turn them in at the clinic. The dentist works out of the same clinic, so sometimes requests get mixed up. I collected a request reading, with Halloween is coming up, can I get some clip-on fangs? Yes, with a hand-drawn fanged smiley face emoji. Is that form 7362? Just a wild guess that you are working at CDCR LOL. My husband spent a couple of months in jail many years before we met. Coke is a hell of a drug, and once a week was movie night. A room full of prisoners cried the night they showed The Notebook. Man, that hits hard. Some may never get a romance like that again, if they're serving very long sentences. I was in the local jail for a night for an alcohol-related incident. The next morning I was still starving after eating a breakfast taco they gave us. My cellmate noticed and gave me his. Cool guy. Reminds me of 5th grade, except instead of my cellmate noticed and gave me his, it was I asked my friend next to me if I could have his lunch and he always said sure, and instead of cool guy, it was I gained 15 pounds that year. I volunteer tutor in local institutions. I help incarcerated individuals work toward earning their high school diploma, those who are illiterate and people who speak English as a second language. I'll never forget how many inmates volunteered their time to help these students work to complete their educational goals. Whether it was to help them study, help translate, or just offer moral support. Learning a new language or subject can be frustrating, so it's incredibly beneficial to have such a supportive environment. You are a beautiful person for doing that. My man was in a mental institution and it took a tutor like you to help him have hope. That person telling him he can do it. Thank you for your service. Keep becoming an inspiration. Last year I left for the army. My last day on shift, as a CO, the inmates came out of their cells, and the ones that were sitting, all stood up and began clapping. Then they began hugging me, shaking my hand, and wishing me luck. Top 3 greatest moments of my life for sure. That's amazing, man. Shows the impact you had on these dudes. I've done volunteer work in prison education programs before and it was just the most pure, wholesome thing ever. We brought in fun science activities that we usually do with kids and these groups of grown men just lost it with excitement. They were so bored all the time. All they wanted to do was learn and ask questions, and they were totally respectful about it. This was especially appreciated as I am a tiny woman. We had fascinating discussions about global warming, made slime and volcanoes. It was awesome. A couple of the guys couldn't read and afterwards they told us they appreciated that we explained everything with pictures and drawings. I love my job. This sounds amazing. I love that you're making a positive impact on these men. My dad was in and out of jail a lot when I was growing up and I have a soft spot for these people. I'm a prosecutor and I received a letter from an inmate a few years ago. I don't remember what the letter said, but on the back of it was the whole block's first round NCAA men's basketball tournament picks. I don't know how Ty ended up finishing, but he was off to a hot start with only 3 missed picks. Wholesome part of the story was working in a medium custody facility in the day room. This unit had a ping pong table in the day room. Inmates were playing each other, and I was watching when an inmate challenged me to a game. I played a lot of ping pong growing up and could hang with the best of them. Had a blast and got to know some of the guys on a different level. Stuff like that gives people a reason to interact and get to know someone as a person and helps remove the power differential that keeps guards and inmates at odds with each other. Less wholesome part of the story. I got called down by the sergeant and reprimanded for lack of professionalism. Went back to standing around and not interacting with inmates. Our prison system is dysfunctional on so many levels. Would require such a culture change to make it work that I'm convinced it will never happen without there being a legislatively mandated policy change. Sorry, the whole story isn't wholesome. Interesting perspective. Thanks for sharing. People usually form really good friendships in prison. All you're doing is hanging out with your cellmate for 20 hours a day. That sounds like a recipe for either a great best friend or a lifelong enemy. My inmate, worker, trusty once pulled off and beat the ever-living crap out of an inmate that jumped my lieutenant from behind. The lieutenant was getting his butt handed to him until said trusty jumped in and saved the lieutenant. Another time, my corporal was attempting to verbally calm this inmate when said inmate started calling her all sorts of obscene names, being rude and disrespectful, even gesturing. The other inmates were not having any of that. They stepped in, made him apologize, and they all apologized to her for having been disrespected, and never has another issue with that inmate ever again. Another time, and this is a huge deal, an inmate let another inmate he didn't know, who was a first-time young kid, use his phone card to call home as his dad was dying at home in hospice. The judge let him out to visit a day later and his dad passed on. He came back and had money put back on the other inmate's books as a thank you. They then became really close. Of course, the older guy who gave him the card was like a father to many of the younger men in that pod, and he maintained order in it. Just for your information, prison in the US can be brutal, but the humanity I've seen displayed inside the walls at times is wholesome and genuine. Props to that judge as well for letting that guy go say goodbye to his dad. That's probably a 1 in a million occurrence. A group of over 100 inmates, all of various religious affiliations, bowing their heads and prayed with our one inmate before Thanksgiving dinner. That's so wholesome, I come tarantulas. I work medical in a jail, and one day while I was doing the evening medication pass in one of our medium security units, a movie was on TV. I was in the unit for 15 or so minutes and it was so funny to see 30 guys crowded around this tiny TV in the day room watching the Interstellar so intently. It was towards the end of the movie, and when it got to the big plot twist, all these guys completely lost it. It was a very humanizing moment, and I've never seen a group of grown men so excited and in awe about something. That movie was out of this world. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.